I'm Amy the Amazonian, and this video is about the basics of Brawl. If you're somebody who usually plays Standard or Alchemy, or if you've collected cards from recent sets by drafting and playing Limited, this video is especially for you. Brawl is a 100-card singleton format, meaning you can have up to one copy of any given card other than basic lands, and you choose a commander to lead your deck. Your commander is any legendary creature or planeswalker in Magic the Gathering Arena, so there are a huge number of options. In Brawl, you start with 25 life, and each card in your deck must match the color identity of your commander, meaning that it can only contain the colors printed in its cost and abilities. Your commander is cast from outside of the game, and can be put back into the command zone when it is killed or exiled to be used again for 2 more mana each time you recast it. Whether you're looking to play spell-slinging combos, tons of tokens, dastardly crimes, armies of elves, or something else entirely, there's a commander for everyone. The most powerful commanders come in a variety of colors and strategies, and sometimes it's best to start with a creature or planeswalker you're already familiar with. Many creatures which make for good commanders are low cost and aggressive, have powerful stats and punish your opponents, give you card advantage, do something when they enter the battlefield and attack, have unusual or unique synergies, or protect themselves with abilities like Ward. Rafine, the high-flying Sphinx of the Esper mid-range deck, is a great evasive creature to helm a deck full of low mana cost removal and counterspells to back up your choice of creatures. The more you attack, the more you connive, and the bigger your creatures get. With 100 cards in a deck, you don't have to worry about drawing too many as you draw and discard to find the perfect pieces. If you're used to playing with a Domain ramp deck, you'll be happy to see Atraxa Grand Unifier and Tatali Primal Conqueror both as powerful commanders in Brawl. With lots of ramp at your disposal, you'll hit 7 mana in no time and get even more cards in hand and spells cast with these big creatures. Liliana of the Veil and Shoulder the Apocalypse are 2 terrifying legendaries from Golgari midrange to face off against in the command zone. Making a deck with 100 different cards can be intimidating, but if you've been playing Standard or Limited with recent sets, you've already got a great head start with building your deck. Many of the best lands and spells are currently in Standard, and there are many cards that are easy to include in a deck of a given color. In Brawl, you typically want to have around 40 lands in your deck. Making sure you can get mana in all of your colors is important, and some lands offer additional functionality as well. Lands that come in untapped early in the game will allow you to quickly cast spells and get an advantage. The fast lands, which were re-released in Phyrexia All Will Be One and Outlaws of Thunder Junction, can help you play those first spells. Once you get to 3 lands, the slow lands from Innistrad Midnight Hunt and Crimson Vow are a great choice for Brawl. The Pain lands, reprinted in Dominaria United and the Brothers' War, cost a little life, but they do come in untapped and can be used at any time in the game. Cavern of Souls, which is a way to prevent your commander creatures from being countered, and Mirex, which gives you a repeatable way to generate artifact creatures, are 2 more lands you can move from your standard deck into many Brawl decks. The Channel lands from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty are also great utility lands to include in almost any deck. Though the lands that come in untapped are great to guarantee casting spells on curve, many of the lands that come in tapped are still a good way to get more fixing or other abilities in your deck. The Restless cycle of creature lands from Wilds of Eldraine and Lost Cavern of Ixalan tap for 2 different colors of mana, and can be animated into creatures. The Surveil lands from Outlaws of Thunder Junction give you the opportunity to change the top card of your library, and put cards into your graveyard, which is especially helpful with commanders that can use those cards later. The 3-color cycling lands from Nuka Pena give you even more access to colors, and can be discarded later in the game to help you find more spells. Some of my favorite lands that you might need to craft, or may already have if you play Explorer, Historic, or Timeless, include the Shock lands from Ravnica and the Fetch lands from Tarkir. These might cost you some life to play, but they offer incredible mana fixing and work especially well with landfall abilities. Once you've got your land set up, you'll want to add spells that work with your commander's theme or strategy. This can be tricky to figure out, but oftentimes you'll be building off of a creature type, ability, or protecting your commander so it can do what it does best. A great example of a new powerful commander from Thunder Junction is Bonnie Paul Clearcutter. She's a high-cost creature that draws you cards and gets you lands back from the graveyard when you attack with a creature. And if that weren't enough, she even comes with a token that scales with the number of lands you control. In order to cast Bonnie Paul, you'll need 6 mana, which means you'll want to cast a lot of creatures that tap for mana, and cast spells that put additional lands into play. Though none of them are from Standard, many of the early ramp spells are common or uncommon cards, and some of the other spells that are common among ramp decks are from Standard, like Topiary Stomper, Spelunking, and Nissa Resurgent Animist. Because Bonnie's ability can bring back lands from the graveyard, you'll want ways to put them there. Lands that can be sacrificed, including the fetch lands and the less common Prismatic Vista, Fabled Passage, and New Capenna self-sacrificing lands, can be great to set up for that on-attack ramp. All of these lands entering the battlefield are also a great way to trigger landfall effects like Scoot Swarm's token-making ability, Tatiova's card draw, and additional mana from Lotus Cobra, Nissa Resurgent Animist, and Tireless Provisioner. So far, I've mostly mentioned the green side of Bonnie Paul, but having access to blue makes this commander even stronger. Counterspells are particularly strong in Brawl, and you may have opened cards like Mana Drain in your Thunder Junction packs. My go-to counterspells for Brawl are Wash Away, Memory Lapse, Tail's End, and Counterspell because they can counter your opponent's commander at a very low cost. Blue also gives you access to silencing auras like Witness Protection and Eaten by Piranhas. This can remove your opponent's commander's abilities and force them to rely on the other spells in their deck. Tashana's Tidebender also toes the line between a creature and a counterspell and a silencing effect, combining all three into a phenomenal card. If you're facing off against a deck whose permanents are outpacing your own, removal is a must-have. Even aggressive decks need to take out blockers so they can force damage through. In blue, Cyclonic Rift is a way to temporarily remove all of your opponent's non-lands permanents at instant speed. Most other mass removal is symmetrical, and standard players are already familiar with the two best board wipes available in Arena, Farewell and Sunfall. Not only can they exile your opponent's creatures, one allows you to choose between exiling multiple permanent types, and the other one leaves you with an incubation token. The modality of Burn Down the House is also helpful when looking for board wipes in red, letting you choose between hasty creatures or damage. One of my personal favorite board wipes in both Brawl and Standard is actually a Planeswalker, the Eternal Wanderer. It forces your opponents to sacrifice their best creatures and lets you keep your own strongest one on the field. She also works great with Enter the Battlefield effects and token-based strategies. Though it's currently banned in Standard, Meathook Massacre is part of the current rotation and is very playable in Brawl. It both removes creatures and drains your opponent's life when your own creatures die. Though taking out many creatures at a time can be efficient, often you'll need single target removal to take out the worst threats on the board. Standard players will recognize many of these cards as ones that they've already played with or against. Because of the variety of threats in Brawl, the best pieces of removal will be instant speed, exiling, and have versatility in their targets. There are many indestructible threats which can't be taken out by everyday removal. And some of those creatures and planeswalkers have hexproof or a high ward cost, making edict effects that force your opponent to sacrifice their permanents important to consider when deck building. There are also many non-creature targets which are worth removing, whether it's artifacts, enchantments, or planeswalkers, so spells which can target many types of permanent are helpful to have. Typically, the more aggressive your deck is, the fewer pieces of removal you'll need, and aggressive decks with low-cost commanders can get early starts that are hard to catch up to. Early game advantage is remarkably important in Brawl. Each color has their best 1-mana spells which either accelerate your deck or slow down your opponents. Low-cost, efficient removal is also a great inclusion in any deck. Many of these cards aren't from Standard, but they are some of the strongest parts of any deck. In White, cards which tax your opponents like Esper Sentinel, Authority of the Consuls, or Curse of Silence can give you card advantage and prevent your opponent from using their creatures and keep them away from casting their commander. Removal like Patriarch's Humiliation, Swords to Plowshares, or Path to Exile can permanently remove many threats, even indestructible creatures at instant speed. White also has protective spells like Loran's Escape, Surge of Salvation, and Brave the Elements to fend off your opponents. In Blue, counterspells, bounce spells, and auras which remove abilities are all playable at 1 mana. Wash Away, Swansong, and Spell Pierce can take out commanders and non-creature spells. Fading Hope forces your opponents to replay their creatures and makes them wait through Summoning Sickness again to attack or tap for abilities. Witness Protection turns any creature into a 1/1 legitimate business person with no abilities. It's an absolute all-star for handling commanders and other big threats. In Black, targeted discard and spells which destroy creatures can interrupt your opponent's setup and stop their creatures before they make an impact. Thoughtseize, Inquisition of Kozilek, Mindspike, and Duress all attack your opponent's hands, and they give you information about what to expect on your next turns. Cut Down and Fatal Push can take out weaker and low-cost creatures as well. In Red, you have burn spells at 1 mana like Lightning Bolt, Play with Fire, Strangle, and Shove Aside, which can destroy your opponent's creatures, and the notorious monkey Ragavan Nimble Pilferer, which both makes you treasures and takes cards from your opponent's deck. Green is often a big reason all these other colors need to load up on early game interaction in Brawl. Green has the consistent early game strategy of producing additional mana, whether that's creatures that tap for mana like Llanowar Elves, Delighted Halfling, or Elvish Mystic, or creatures that put additional lands into play like Arboreal Grazer or Combi of Bamboo Groves, or an aura like Utopia Sprawl. Green decks are oftentimes generating 3 mana on turn 2 to get even more mana acceleration into play. Green also has cheap protective spells like Tamiyo's Safekeeping, Tyvar's Stand, and Snakeskin Veil to keep your commander and other permanents on the board safe from harm. Finally, Green has access to exiling artifacts and enchantments in Haywire Might, which even gains life when you use it. There are many other great 1-mana cards for all sorts of strategies, and there are so many styles of decks you can brew. In Outlaws of Thunder Junction and Thunder Junction Alchemy, we were introduced to great legendary creatures, including some of the best commanders for Brawl. Some of my favorites include Laughing Jasper Flint, who builds up an army of outlaws and borrows cards from your opponent's library to hire their creatures as mercenaries. Jiza the Hellraiser raises zombies during each turn you commit a crime. She rewards you for what mono-black decks are already doing, targeting all of your opponent's cards with removal. Bonnie Paul Clearcutter, who I showed earlier, comes with her very own Ox, draws cards, and puts lands into play to help Bo grow. Loot, the key to everything, rewards playing a diverse group of permanent types by putting cards in exile for you to cast each turn. Bristly Bill gets big, fast with his landfall ability, adding counters for each land, then uses up all that extra mana to double the number of counters on all of your creatures. Tai Joaquin Perfect Shot increases the damage dealt by any non-combat source and draws you even more burn spells if you manage to deal exactly the amount of damage needed to take down a creature. Parchesa, Dealer of Death, turns your crimes into card advantage, helping you draw interactive spells while you fill your graveyard with creatures you can reanimate. Roxanne, Starfall Savant, is the cool cat who finds mighty meteorites when she enters the battlefield and attacks, giving you more ramp, more removal, and makes all of your artifact tokens tap for extra mana. Satoru the Infiltrator sneaks in with broad synergies. He draws you a card when a creature enters the battlefield without being cast or being cast for no mana, which works with ninjutsu, reanimation, plot, blink, and free spells. Renzo, Crooked Jailer, executes heists on your opponent's decks, and then casts their spells for free. The better cards your opponent has, the better Renzo gets. Nashi, Illusion Gadgeteer, brings your cards back from the graveyard, and gives them flash too. Though they may not be present on the plane of Thunder Junction, the Alchemy set also introduced Teysa of the Ghost Council and Emperor Apatzek Intli IV, which are both powerful commanders worth playing. And, unlike Standard and Alchemy, Brawl is a non-rotating format, meaning you'll be able to play your favorite commanders for as long as you'd like. Hopefully seeing how many of your already great Standard and Alchemy cards are played in Brawl will make taking this first step into my favorite format a little easier. With 100 cards to play with, there's always room for your favorite cards in a deck. If you'd like to find more of my Brawl content, be sure to check out twitch.tv/Amazonian and youtube.com/Amazonian. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you'll join me in the Brawl queue for some big singleton fun.